Hello everybody and welcome to this month's BIM practice group meeting. Today we'll be listening to David Watson talk about a continuation of our, couple of months now of looking at demos and information with different BIM software that is out there for you to utilize in your daily activity. David Watson has over 25 years experience in the construction industry and is currently president of Digicon Information Incorporated, one of Canada's 2 developers of commercial master specifications. Watson's career began with an honors diploma from Northern Alberta Institute of Technology in the air conditioning engineering program. He worked in the HVAC field in a variety of capacities: an estimator, air and water balancing, and sales. As a software developer during the 1980s, Watson assisted his father's independent specification practice by developing software tools. During this period, the Smart Specification software system was developed and sold in Canada and the USA. Digicon Information, where David currently works, was a partnership formed in 1996 with Wayne Watson, who retired in 2011. Digicon develops and maintains commercial master specifications and provides a variety of software development and writing services related to specifications and construction product information. Watson is involved in a variety of volunteer organizations and is registered as a certified engineering technologist and a 25-year member of the Alberta Society of Engineering Technologists, also known as ASET.
The overview of what I'm going to cover is I've got a few slides here, then I'll jump into my software demonstration to show you where we're at today, and then after that I'll go switch back to the slideshow again, talking to you about what's in the either the short and the long-term future for our tool. As was mentioned, this is primarily a specification tool, although with specifications hotly being attempted to be integrated with BIM, there's a big BIM focus, and hence the name BIMdrive, which is the name of our tool. So I'm just going to cover a little bit about how this came about, a little bit about, I need to give you a little bit of theory on how BIMdrive operates, some basic concepts, and then run straight into the demo. So I'll start with a little bit of an introduction to us. You got a fair bit there on myself from Matthew. Digicon's a family business, still very small, based here in Alberta, Canada. We do consulting services and sales, of course, the sales related to master specifications and software, consulting related to specifications generally, and both to architects and engineers and to manufacturers to help with guide specifications and their literature. Specs.ca is also an entity which is an electronic storefront through which all of the Digicon's products are sold, and it's also an alliance with Construction Specifications Canada, the sister organization to CSI up here in Canada, where we also sell all of CSC's publications. So BIMdrive itself, the software, is a result of years of participation by the directors of Digicon to conferences all over the world, beginning with ISIS before the term BIM became common, and also working in ISO committees dealing with information management, initially with classification and then later with building modeling. Development of the software itself officially began around 2008, where we started to put pen to paper, so to speak, to use an old term, I guess, and the software was officially released in July of last year. BIMdrive is much more than a processor that develops specification text. We've developed it into what we like to call a specifier's tool, and I think you'll get a sense for what I mean by that when we get a little further. Okay, so a little bit of theory on how BIMdrive handles data. We basically narrowed things down to 3 fundamental entity types that we're dealing with. One is called an object type, and that's where if an entity exists in a model or in a project and it needs to be specified, that's an object type. It could be a product or it could be a material. The fundamental rule for what an object type is that it exists and that there's at least one. So in the case of a master specification, if an object doesn't exist, then of course we don't want it in the final specification. So that's where the the prerequisite that there should be a minimum of one of that object in order to be included in a specification. But there's no maximum. So if there's 100 different doors in a project, but they're all the same type, we're only concerned with the one object door type. So the next entity type is a component. Now a component is almost exactly like an object. It's treated very similarly, except it has a special relationship with the object type in that the component would not typically exist by itself. And it would only exist if the object type that it belongs to would exist. Now that becomes important a little bit later on. I'll explain it on the next slide. And then the third type is a property. Now a property is an entity that describes a qualitative attribute about an object or a component. So some common properties would be color, and then there would be a name associated with the color, or coordinates with a color code. It often has a value, and it can be associated with a unit, although not necessarily. But the fundamental difference between property and the other two types is that property would never exist on its own. It's a way of describing an object or a component. So the next step is how we tie those three things together is through relationships. Now there's two fundamental relationships that happen between objects and components. So objects can have specialization, which means that if you have a certain object type, you can also have more specialized object types. And the reason why we have the specialization relation is that BIMdrive itself, as you're including or excluding various types of objects, can inherit attributes from its parent. So to give you an example, if we have a security door, there will be some components or properties associated with a security door, but because we need a security door, it will also inherit all of the objects or components and properties of its parent, which are doors, which is a more general type of object. So that's why we have that relation type. The next one is called composition, and that is simply the relationship that establishes that an object is a component by having a composition relation between the component itself and the object that it belongs to. So a component is always associated with an object. So here's some examples in specialization. I use this security door example as a type of door. Some components, you have a door leaf, a door frame, and door hardware. As you can see, none of those things would exist without the door itself. So that's why those things are classed as components. And then the other one I hadn't mentioned specifically, but within the software, the relationship between a property and the thing that describes is the property relation. So some examples of that are the configuration of a door, a single leaf or double leaf, swing versus sliding, color, of course, with a term to describe the color, width with a dimension, and some units, etc. So those are all properties. So BIMdrive itself, because we're looking at specification text in which we're talking about materials and products, let's look at the CAD side for a moment. BIM software basically constructs models using elements, so walls, floors, and also doors and windows. So because we're dealing with a couple of there's two fundamental different types, and as a specification application, we need to deal with them a little bit separately. A simple building element is what we just define as an object that you would draw in a CAD program or in BIM program that you would have a one-to-one relation with a specification section. So an example there is a door or a window or a light fixture. All of those things have a corresponding section assigned to it. And then we have complex building elements, and what those are building elements that are composed of multiple layers of materials, and it's those individual materials that are specified, not the entire element itself. So most of you on this call are probably specifiers or know a lot about specifications. You realize that we don't actually specify walls. We specify the components of the wall, the gypsum, the studs, the bricks, etc. So that's what we mean by a complex building element, and they have to be, as you can imagine, treated a little bit separately because the specification can't can be connected directly to a simple building element, but must be connected indirectly to the complex ones by pointing the specification data to the individual materials in the element. Okay, moving on. The next slide here is a simple graphical representation of really what we're dealing with. It shows the BIM view represents a number of one or more building objects. In this case, it's a water closet. And then on the right-hand side, we have the specification view, which is a single section with a variety of clauses. Some are general, some are product-related, some are execution-related. And what we're really doing with BIMdrive is we're using the term that's used to describe those things in the model and the terms that have been assigned to the various text in our data and matching them based on those terms. That's essentially what BIMdrive does. So just the last slide before I get into showing you the software itself, the process that we recommend, at least today when we're not connecting directly with models, I should have mentioned probably earlier that BIMdrive is really designed as a specifications tool, and we fully realize that not everybody is using building models, so it's been designed to be able to interface with the text, the master specification text, as if it were a building model, even though it doesn't connect to a building model, or don't need to connect to a building model. So the procedure here is to, it's basically the same, very similar to Word, but with one or two exceptions. We add the master sections to the project. We select the object types that are required in the project using a checkbox interface that I'll show you in a minute. Then we select the relevant components and properties of those objects. And then after that, those processes are all done, we can review and edit the text. Optionally, we can show and hide the inapplicable paragraphs and the spec notes. The spec notes are very much like the specifier notes that you see in commercial master specs all across North America. They can be turned on and off easily. The inapplicable paragraphs function is something that we see in some software now in the USA, where when you're editing a project, you don't necessarily delete paragraphs, you simply hide them from view. And the added advantage to that, of course, is the ability to add it back into the project quite easily by simply unhiding it as the project conditions change. Up here in Canada, we have two units of measure. The metric or SI units are, of course, the predominant, but there's still some projects that are done up here, renovation projects or projects that are near the American border where the owners or the consultants prefer to deal with inch-pound measures. We can toggle those measures using our software. And, of course, we can modify headers and formatting preferences for the entire project. Okay, so I'm going to move directly into the demo now, unless anybody has any questions on what I've said so far.
I'm not seeing any here, David.
I've got the BIMdrive interface open in my window right now. You don't see it there?
No, we do. I was just letting you know we don't have any questions.
Oh,
sorry.
That's good. Okay, so this is the BIMdrive interface, and it looks an awful lot like Office 2010, if any of you have that, and that was by design. When we started building it, Office 2010 was still fairly new. I think 2007 was the newest thing at the time, and we were looking, of course, far ahead, thinking that a lot of users would eventually migrate to this sort of interface. So that's what it basically copies. So we've got the File menu, and the options down the side here, File New, File Print. These are all common or normal Office 2010 functions. We've got the Home tab with a few select icons that I'll show you a little bit later. The Edit tab, which basically deals with editing functions in the window. And a View tab, which allows you to view or not view various aspects of the project. So what I do is these icons here in the View tab give us access to the master specification. And in this case, we've got an Office master, which I've loaded an empty one here. And then we have these all sections, which is essentially a copy of our Canadian master specification. It's our full master spec. So you can show or hide these tabs by using these control buttons over here, and we can bring them back by simply clicking on those. Okay, so what I'll do right now is we'll just tack that to the left. Is I'll create a new project. Let's give it a name, Web CSI, and I'll just put it in my documents folder, the handy place. And we should have come up with these project sections. So now what we can do is select one of the specifications from Master Spec. The one I selected to look at is flagpoles. It's fairly simple and allows you to see most of the functions that I want to demonstrate. So I should mention that this is going to take a few seconds because our master spec in the software is actually designed to access the master text through a cloud server that we've set up. And I'll just take a moment then to go there. If we select File Options, these are the options. In BIMdrive, we have the option to access a cloud server, in which case anyone with internet access will access the CMS. Whenever we do our quarterly updates, in our case, we update that text every quarter, every 3 months. The users never have to go download anything. They're always accessing the latest sections. You do have the option to access a file. If you want to download a database and access it from offline from a file, you can do that. What I've done here is I've configured it so that the master, our CMS master, is accessed from the cloud, and I've configured the Office Master to be accessed from a file that I created. So while we're here in the options, we'll just look at a few of these other options. BIMdrive has been configured to also deal with multiple languages. Up here in Canada, we have the National Master Specification that's published in English and French. And with one of the more recent versions, we enabled a function in BIMdrive to not only keep track of the text and associate them with building models, but we also enable the user to interface with either or both languages, English or French. So the idea here being that a user editing a specification could edit in one language by selecting various paragraphs or deselecting various paragraphs in English, for example, and then simply changing the language and producing a specification in French. Of course, anytime a paragraph is selected, there is a corresponding paragraph in the other language. Whenever a user selects an option from an option list, the corresponding options in the other language is selected. So BIMdrive can actually produce a specification in a second language by interfacing with a first language in every case, except when you're introducing new text. Of course, you need to provide a translation. So that's an exciting feature that we're interested in up here in Canada that I'm not too sure if you'd use that in the USA. We can do spell as you type, spell check as you type. There's also spell checking function. And this is where we would configure a project-wide setting, which is how you want to specify the font and text at the end of each section. So those are the options. I'm going to switch back now and open a section so we can see what that looks like.
And David?
Yes.
While that section is going, we have a question from the audience wondering, does BIMdrive function with other master specifications or other offices' own masters? We have an authoring function that we use to author the CMS that's offered with the software. The question, will it interface with other master specifications? Yes, it would. The proviso is that all of the engineering that we've done, in other words, assigning these terms of the types, components, and properties to the various paragraphs, and the tagging of those options within the paragraphs would have to be done with that other master. So the short answer is yes. The long answer is it would take quite a bit of effort to get another master up to the same condition that this is in. All right, thank you. And then one last more of a comment while that's going on. It's an indication that the language support you had for Canada and French
Yes.
indicated from Brian, it may be interesting also with the U.S. and Spanish due to so many projects being on the southern borders as well.
Okay, well that's definitely a possibility. The functionality is here, by virtue of us adding a second language, we simply opened it up to enable others. We're actually in discussion with a Swedish company about providing a Swedish version, and adding more languages based on the engineering that we did for it is quite easy.
Great, thank you very much, David.
Okay, so what happens here is we look at the various types and components and properties are all listed on the left side here. And what we can do is we can select the various types and components that we're looking for. So for example, here I'll just limit it to an aluminum flagpole. These are all components that are common to flagpoles, so you can select them or deselect them as you want. Let's say we don't want any closeout submittals. Let's say we don't care about the grounding. Well, actually, you probably want grounding on everything. We can choose from mounting components. If we select, for example, simple on a full base, don't care about roof or wall supports, we can deselect those. We can select, let's see, we don't need an electric operator and just a manual, and we can go even deeper to various subtypes. So by browsing this interface, you can select those things that you want or you don't want included in the section. And then as you're going along, you can, of course, use this show hidden paragraphs feature to display those paragraphs that have been hidden. Here's an example. When we selected no closeout submittals, the closeout submittals here were done. This should actually have also been included. And you can override the system by using simple right-click menu items. So the pole materials, the various other pole materials that we deselected, they've been deselected automatically. These are the various mounting types that we deselected. And of course, all of these functions, of course, are not just connected to the Part 2 items, but they're also connected if it's relevant to Part 3 items. Okay, and moving over to the right side, then you'll notice that there's some different colors here. Wherever there's this purple or plum shade, that means it's an option that you can select. Basically, it's the equivalent to the square bracket sets of options that you'd see in Master Spec. They've been combined into a drop-down list. And there's actually various types of drop-down lists. Here's one for the flagpole design. You can select from any one of these. We could also, for example, have more control over these various options by modifying them. We could say that we can allow multiple selections, and if you do allow multiple selections, you can join those selections with an AND or an OR to make those selections either inclusive or exclusive. So if we change this one here to AND and we select one or two more of these, you can see what the result is. We can get all three of these, and the grammar is automatically selected by the system, separated them by commas and with an AND. Or we could say, in this case, rather than having all three of these types, it's probably more appropriate for the flagpole design to allow any one or those other types. So we select that, and it says Venetian tapered, step tapered, or swage sectional, basically saying that you can allow any one of those three options. Now, within BIMdrive, we also uniquely identify units of measure, which are essentially properties. So in this case, we've got a diameter property with 150 millimeters. And if you wanted to see the inch-pound measure, you can simply use this to view what that measure is. If you don't like that measure and you want to add one for your own use, let's say 6 inches isn't enough, let's add a measurement option. We'll put in 200 in this case, 200 millimeter, which is 8 inches. Click Add, and then of course we have another option. We can select that one. So that's how we deal with these options. Now, you also have the option, of course, to click Delete, and then you can type in whatever dimension you like. But if you do that, then BIMdrive doesn't understand that any custom text you type, for example here, I'm one finger typing here, that's why I got the phone in the other hand. So anytime the user adds more text, BIMdrive doesn't necessarily understand what the user is typing in. So this is why we recommend, rather than deleting this option and simply typing in 200 millimeter or 8 inches, that they go through the effort of using this interface to add the dimension that they are looking for, and then BIMdrive will understand that that is a diameter and that it's been expressed in millimeters or inches. In a few cases here, there's what we call an insert value, which is a blank value that we don't predetermine what might go in there. We simply allow you, the specifier, to determine what that should be. So in that case, we simply add the option. New. Forgive my spelling. Option. Add. And that would take the place of the insert value. As I mentioned, you can actually, as I showed up here, type in more text if you like. The system does allow you to add new paragraphs as well. Simply put the cursor at the end of the paragraph and start typing here. You can also indent and outdent just like you can in Word, and the numbering is automatic. What we've done is, although the interface looks simple, and we've gone through quite a few hoops to make sure that it remains simple, all of the metadata that you see on the left-hand side is being tracked in here. So as you're adding and moving data, the system, BIMdrive, is keeping track of all of that metadata to make sure that none of it is lost. So as you can appreciate, as we're working here, we've also got a facility for changing the section name and number here if you like. We've got a facility for updating the header and the header styles. I won't spend too much time into that because I want to make sure that we cover more of the BIM stuff. And also the footer. Here's where we could, this section is only in one language, but if we had an NMS section loaded, we could see both English and French text. And what we do is we stack them one on top of the other. So someone who's performing a conversion will be able to see the NMS English text, the NMS French text right underneath it. And if there were a custom paragraph added by the author, we would highlight that as requiring a translation. Here's where we could click to show the spec notes. We have spec notes in these sections. I had them hidden for our demo. Into the edit here, this is where we could do things like increase or decrease the spacing between paragraphs. We can change the numbering style. We've got some pre-configured ones here. We can indent or outdent using these buttons as well. I was using the hotkeys. Here's where you can pre-configure the common styles that are used. And we copied these heading styles from the Microsoft Word heading styles. I think in the future, our users have mentioned they prefer to see what these heading styles represent, the parts, articles, etc. So I think in the next version or two, we'll be changing that. Some of the more interesting functions here, we can copy sections between projects and office masters using this, a number of sections. If you're working on a section in a project and you want to copy them, you can also use the project sections interface here. And that one happens to be locked, probably because I closed it without saving it. So I can unlock that one. Okay, so we can copy between any local or remote database and to and from any local and remote database. So in our case, a local database might be the project, the remote database might be the office master. You could also run compares, and this compare function is designed for when you have an office master and we've updated the underlying CMS master that the office master was based on. You can use this compare function to compare the two sections, review the changes, and then allow it to update or not update the changes to your office master. So that's another very handy feature. So moving on, so we've got in the file menu, we've got a number of items. We can protect the project. Either you mark it as final, in other words, kind of lock it down. We can encrypt it with a password. And if you want to share the database with someone, we can restrict access. So in this case, our project has only one section. If we wanted, if we had more sections, they would all be listed. You can choose to lock certain sections as not being editable. So that's something you might want to do with, for example, Division 1 sections, where you want some authors, some technologies to prepare sections on various subjects, but you don't want them to necessarily modify the Division 1 sections. You could simply lock them in BIMdrive here so that those users don't have access. We also have a check here. Now, because BIMdrive is caught managing all of this metadata, right now this check function, all it does is it looks at the section, looks at references in the section to outside sections, and simply produces a report here that these are sections that are cited within the text, and these are the paragraphs where they're cited, and it says that basically that section is not in the project. In the future, what we're thinking to do is that because BIMdrive, maybe I'll go back and open this section again. Because BIMdrive is keeping track of the metadata, what we're thinking to do is do some buildability checks where it may check that if aluminum flagpoles is selected and the finish down here in finishes in part 2 isn't appropriate for an aluminum finish, we could perform checks like that. We could also perform buildability checks that we can come up with on our own. For example, if we selected a window and there's no references to caulking, we could run that check and prompt the user, you've got windows in your project, are you sure you don't want caulking as well? So those are kind of future ideas that we've got with this checking function. We also got logging. The BIMdrive keeps track of all the users that are logged into a project and the time that they spend on the project. So, of course, it doesn't actually log the time you actually work. It only logs the time that the user has been logged into the project. But it's good enough. So this is simply a recent list of projects that we've had open and folders that I've had open. The file new is where we could create a new project. We could create a new section. We can do this right now. So to create a new section, we simply give it a section name. New section. We can give it a number, 010101. By default, we're given 3 parts, and we can select here using this handy function of adding. These are all of the standard section format articles, so we can add the articles that we'd like to see in our section. We can go to part 2 articles, materials, operation, and some part 3 articles. Protection, and let's see, installation. And as soon as that all looks good, we can click OK, and our project will have this new section included, and all of the article titles are in here. So that's how we can create a new section. We can create a new office master using these, and you can have as many office masters as you like. You would simply save each of the office masters as a local file. You can have an office master for certain customers or certain clients. You can have office masters for certain building types. It's entirely up to you. We can set print, and this print layout is very much the same as the Office 2010 print layout, where you can do simply a table of contents or all the pages, and when you select all pages, it'll automatically render the project. The table of contents is a dynamic document that's compiled each time you run a print job, and that's because the table of contents changes every time you go into to do an edit. So right now you can see that we've got our new section there, and this is the flagpole section, has a table of contents, and there's our flagpole section exactly as we edited. Save and send is a function where we can export the project to an XPS document. That's a Microsoft read-only standard. We can export to Word, and our Word export essentially exports to docx files, and each section in the project is exported as an independent document. The reason why we configured it that way is because that's how 99% of the specification marketplace in North America deal with work sections as one section per document. The PDF document, on the other hand, creates a single PDF, and that's because normally when you want to exchange an entire project, you want everything contained in a single PDF document. And in developer version, this is where we could export the resulting document to our masters. We actually publish our docx files that we sell to the public through this function here. And the help menu, this simply brings up an email message to the support line, some information about the software, and options. I told you a little bit earlier, is simply the window with all the options. Okay, so I think I've shown you just about everything I need to show you as far as the interface is concerned. Let's take, can we take just a second if anybody has questions before I have a few closing remarks about some of the functionality that is difficult to show and what we're coming up in the next few versions. Any questions?
Yeah, we actually have quite a few here for you, David. So a couple of them, I just didn't want to interrupt you while you're going through. So a couple of these may feel like they're a little bit past what you were just recently talking about, but I think they're great conversation topics. One being, what database system does BIMdrive run on? Is it MySysCal? Is it some independent database system you use yourself? What's the actual system BIMdrive runs on?
That's a good question. Right now we support 4 databases. We support SQL Server Compact, SQL Server, MySQL, and Access. We developed the database engine to be portable for a number of reasons, and those were very common database formats. So it standardizes basically on SQL Server Compact by default, but we've separated the engine code from the data access code so that we can quite simply and easily add future or other database formats as we need to.
Okay. Next question comes from the same person. If you type more text, does it also add it in the second language, i.e. in this case French, or does it only work with the master text that it does that?
No, if you type text into when you're dealing with 2 languages, we've been wrestling with that, whether to copy the English text into the French or whether to simply flag that paragraph as needing translation. This is a new feature, and so I think initially we're going to leave it as flagging it, and then if the user goes to print or goes to save the document, we'll pop up a window saying that there are some paragraphs that require some translation. Okay.
Going on that line, Brian's wondering, how close are you to duplicating efforts with the IFD / now the BSDG with language translation?
Well, we focused on developing the language that we use in our own database, and our next step is coordinating with the Building Smart Data Dictionary to make sure that all of the concepts that we have in our database are in the dictionary, and then to extract those data dictionary IDs so that we can use them when we're interfacing with BIM models. So that's our next step, basically.
Okay, great. A few more questions here. After the copy-paste from a master to a project file, do the data fields integrate with the project file?
Yes. In fact, the project file is essentially a copy of the master, but because we assign unique IDs to everything in our system, so when people make changes, we know what paragraphs and what sections are modified. All of the options are all copied over, and we know which options have been selected, that sort of thing. So when we do a compare, we can actually compare IDs of the paragraphs to see which paragraphs are perhaps missing, which is something that would be really difficult to do otherwise.
Perfect. Next question here. Can the project file be converted directly into an Office master?
Yes. You do it using that copy button, or you can do it using there's a copy button on the project windows here. I can show you. When you go to the project sections, this is your project with all the sections. You can highlight here. These sections are both locked because they're open, but you can highlight all the sections you want in your project to add. Click the Add to Office Master, and they're copied over. The other way to do it is to use this copy button up here. Select the project on one side and your Office Master on the other.
Great. 2 more questions I have so far, so if anyone else has some, please get them in soon here. Well, all this information on this side of the database is great. Is there, or does it talk to an interface to model any elements?
At present it doesn't, but what you see up here is a button for IFC file. We're using this right now as a test bench, and we're building configuration files to help us match up the objects and components and properties that you see on the left side here with relevant materials and products or elements in the building model. That'll become a little bit more clear in the next few slides that I'm going to show you how to do that. But that's effectively how we're doing it, is we're building algorithms to match these terms or synonyms to those terms with building model terms.
Great. One more question, well actually 2 more questions, one just popped up. Are you by any chance anticipating, or do you already work with AI Master Spec?
We anticipate that that is a definite possibility. I'm not sure if ARCOM have made this public or not, but when we embarked on the research for engineering how this would all work, we actually started out working with ARCOM, but we found that our priorities were a little bit different, and it was it's a very difficult thing to coordinate software development between 2 independent companies. So we ended up striking off and doing our own thing, and ARCOM put their efforts into doing a few other things. But because our technology is based on the same foundation, when we get to a certain point, I think it's very possible that we'll be able to exchange data sets, where if somebody wants to use AIA data in our software, or if somebody wants to use our CMS data in ARCOM software, that it's a definite possibility.
Okay. And then lastly, here starts off with a compliment. So I guess Adam likes your presentation. Adam James asks, well, very impressive, but is it possible to integrate the spec to produce reports? Example, a list of all sections required closeout submittals to give to the contractor.
Yes, that is extremely high on a list of enhancements to include. We've got a very, very long such list, and in fact, we've kind of pushed a lot of those very important specification functions aside in order to complete the BIM connectivity, which we hope to get done before the end of the year. So the answer is today it doesn't. Tomorrow or next week it might.
Great. Well, that looks to be all the questions we have currently. So if you wanted to do your wrap-up slides, and we'll see if anyone else has any last-minute questions.
Yep, there's only about 4 or 5 slides, and they cover some things that are difficult to explain using the software itself. This is just a little bit of a summary. So we've got 2 interfaces that the specifier can use. One is the building entity and property using the checkboxes interface, and the other is the editable text. This concept that the master text is never deleted, is only hidden, should only benefit our processes as clients decide to include something, then exclude it, then include it again. Our cloud data service, where the CMS raw published data is available always online all the time, and it's always updated. There's no downloading involved until you go to actually get a section. Global formatting control over the project. Full networking support. BIMdrive is a multi-user application. What happens is that the project locks on a section level, so you can have many users working on a single project, but only one user operating on a single section at a time. We built in some security, some password security if you need it, user logging, exporting primarily to PDF and docx, and of course unlimited Office Master capability. We designed the system to include or support any classification. Now this was an issue because when we were designing it, master format 2004 had just come into play, and we thought there would be potentially many future versions, so we designed a system so that we could actually use any classification system, whether it's master format or any others. Here's where I had a slide actually on the database server. These are the 4 types of database servers that we support, at least today. We have experimented with some of the other ones, but we haven't built in full support for them. Multiple languages, English and French right now. Small footprint. The installer for this software, the demo, is actually the demo is the full application. We simply require an activation code, and our installer is only 7 megabytes. Unlike quite a few other softwares that require you to install almost gigabytes of data to run. We designed it from the ground up to be highly adaptable. For example, giving the specifier the ability to assemble very complex elements like building blocks, using building blocks from the specification. And by doing that, you can then specify very complex assemblies with many items with one click by doing that. The engine can be adapted to, for example, web-based software as a service. We did a pilot where we moved the engine for BIMdrive into a web server, and we built a very quick Silverlight interface and proved the concept that we can quite easily do that. So that's on our radar as well. In the near future, 2.1 is almost ready, where we've added image support where you can insert images. That wasn't supported. It's not supported today, actually, but we're just in the process of testing it. We've also built in some table support, both simple tables where you simply want to draw a table and type in text in it, but also configurable tables where you could, for example, specify that you want to list all the type objects in the rows and a number of properties along the columns, and have the table auto configure itself. And of course, we've also streamlined the code a little bit. What I showed you is actually the 2.0 interface. The 2.1 interface should be even faster. We noticed a speed increase. Version 3.0 probably will be ready in December, and that's where we'll finalize our BIM support. Initially, we'll be supporting IFCs, and we're also looking at the Revit API, and depending on how far we get in December, we may include that, or we'll include that in a 3.1 version, Revit support. A keyword map database is going to be included in that version, and what that means is that we're going to have a database of relationships connecting keywords that the modelers choose to use with the appropriate objects, components, or properties that we want to connect them to on the text side. You'll be able to we'll build a tool so you'll be able to maintain these different terms. So if you do, for example, a specification for 2 different clients or 2 different consultants, you'll be able to keep separate maps for what terms they use in that office and what terms they use in another office. And of course, an assembly creator, a means to build complex assemblies based on keywords or terms that we would have in our database. That should be all ready by December. I've got one slide here. I know that there are some solutions out there that use key notes or codes and embedding such codes in the models. And I've got a few notes here about why we think using keywords is far more flexible and far better way to build this integration. The codes are proprietary. So, for example, if you have a specific type of an object, like a flagpole, for example, and you've given this flagpole a code 107540 or .01 or .02, .03, those specific codes are rarely shared between any 2 companies. So that's one disadvantage, where keywords could potentially be used everywhere. At least a number of synonyms, maybe one of a number of synonyms may be used everywhere. Keynotes are inflexible. If you don't code a keynote into the model, you don't necessarily, it would be very difficult to query what objects may not have been coded or are missing. Whereas if you're actually looking for keywords, you may be able to find a certain number of objects that have not yet been matched to a keyword name. And the other thing is that keynotes rarely, if ever, in fact, I've never seen a keynoting system that identifies properties. And whereas if you use keywords, we can identify a property precisely. We can even use the BIM functionality within the CAD program to determine what property or what object this property belongs to, and then match that up with the corresponding property on the spec side, on the spec database. So keywords, the keyword approach, we feel, are far more open and flexible than trying to use a keynoting system to make the connections between models and the specification text. So possibilities for future, we'll be able to check, I think, for text that does not match a BIM object, or BIM objects that don't match any text. Within the spec, we can look for references that don't exist and check for those. We can add some dependencies if we want to, and this could be a user-defined thing. If you use a particular type of window, for example, you may want to connect that to a specific type of caulking, and we can build these rule checks and essentially query the specification to make sure that everything is caught. And of course, doing some buildability algorithms. Have you assigned a finish that isn't appropriate for the material that you've selected, sort of thing. BIMdrive or a program like it could contribute a great deal of information of detail into models. We found during a pilot project that we did for the Department of National Defense that only a small amount of data that a specifier deals with can be or could even be included in a CAD model. CAD models don't carry data about the warranty of a product, or in some cases they don't even carry an instance of an object. For example, in a cast-in-place concrete section, in the specification we almost always specify concrete formwork, but that's never modeled. So that's an example of a situation where the specification has to deal with far more information, object types, and far more details about those objects than you normally deal with in a CAD program. And of course, BIM specifications can produce more consumable knowledge for project management. That was one of your questions, and that definitely is on our radar, and it's a very near and important development that we're planning to do sooner rather than later. And that concludes my presentation. So unless there's any other questions, that's basically it.
Great. Well, David, we actually do have two more questions, or I guess a question and a comment for you. So the question is just wondering, is within the system, with all the changes that you're adding to your example with the flagpoles, yes, when you get to the end of a project, is there a track changes, similar to like what's in Microsoft Office Suite, so you can go back and look at the end of a CD and a CA and just see what changes may have happened throughout the life cycle of a project?
I can answer that by telling you that the foundation for track changes is there, because every paragraph and every option within a paragraph is assigned a unique ID, and we also assign dates as the last time that entity was edited. We have not implemented that sort of functionality in the interface yet, but you are able to use, as a stopgap measure, you are able to use the compare function to compare any two sections and any two databases, and it will give you a red line strikeout picture of what has been changed.
Okay. And then just, I guess for your own mental safety here, comment indicating that a member of the group also did agree with you in the idea that you're talking about with keyword approach versus keynote as being a successful idea. So.
Well, it's one idea. My point here is that in our opinion, the keyword idea, as opposed to a key, like an individual coded keynote, is a far more flexible and better way to go in the long run. So if anyone disagrees with that, I'm more than happy to have a debate offline, of course.
So thank you, David. If you have any closing words, or else let you get back to work and let us all get back to finishing up our Fridays before the weekend starts.
No, the only closing words I have are to extend my appreciation to yourself and to Roger for the opportunity and the invitation to come and speak to everybody today. And my email and my office door is wide open to anybody who has any questions about how we're doing things or wants to know any more information. So thanks for the invite.